Have you ever seen a courtroom fall completely silent because of a dog? One bark, that's all it took. A single sound from a German shepherd named Max turned laughter into tears and disbelief into truth. What happened next changed not just a trial, but the way people saw loyalty, justice, and love. This isn't just another hero dog story. It's a story about what happens when courage doesn't wear a badge or a uniform, but fur. About how a little girl who couldn't speak found her voice again, not through therapy or time, but through the eyes of the dog who once saved her life. I've spent years studying the bond between humans and animals, how dogs like Max can heal trauma, protect us, and even remind us what real compassion looks like. And this story, it's proof of that magic. So stay with me, because by the end, you won't just hear a story about a police dog. You'll feel something deeper. The reminder that love, loyalty, and healing can come from the most unexpected places. And who knows? It might even make you look at your own dog a little differently tonight. The city was quiet that night, except for the distant hum of traffic and the faint dripping of rain against cracked window glass. Inside a small apartment, at the end of a dimly lit hallway, the light from a single bulb flickered weakly, casting restless shadows that danced across the peeling walls. It was the kind of place where silence never truly existed, only pauses between arguments, the kind that made a child hold her breath and pray for the night to pass faster. Under the old wooden table, a girl no older than 7 crouched low, her knees pulled to her chest. In her small, trembling hands was a worn, plush bear, its ear torn off, its fur darkened with time. She held it tightly against her heart, as if it could somehow shield her from the chaos outside. Beside her, pressed close enough for her to feel his heartbeat, was a young German shepherd puppy. His name was Max. His fur was still soft, his paws too big for his body, but his eyes, deep, brown, and alert, watched every movement in the room with instinctive protectiveness. The shouting began again. A man's voice, hoarse, slurred, and angry, ripped through the small apartment like a storm. "You think you can talk back to me?" The girl flinched at the sound of glass shattering. A plate crashed against the wall, scattering pieces across the floor like tiny white tears. Her mother's voice followed, trembling, begging him to stop. But each word only seemed to fuel his rage. The girl's hands shook. She covered her ears, burying her face into the soft fur of Max's neck. He whined quietly, sensing her fear. Then he lifted his head and growled, a low, uncertain sound. But it was enough to make her look up. His ears perked, his tail stiffened. He was ready to defend her, though he didn't yet understand what danger truly was. Another crash, the sound of something heavy hitting the floor. Her mother screamed, then silence, sharp and sudden, like the world itself had stopped breathing. The girl's heart pounded so loudly she thought it would give her away. She heard footsteps stumbling toward the kitchen, toward her hiding place. Her eyes darted around, desperate for escape, but there was nowhere to go. Her small hand reached out, trembling, resting on Max's collar. "Shh," she whispered, though no sound truly came out. Her voice was fragile, barely air. Then, the footsteps stopped. The man stood in the doorway. His shadow filled the frame. Broad, uneven, swaying. The smell of alcohol clung to him. In his hand, a broken bottle gleamed under the faint light. His eyes, red, wild. "Where are you, you little brat?" he slurred. "You think I don't know you're hiding?" The girl froze. Max growled again, louder this time. The man's eyes snapped toward the sound. "You stupid mutt!" he roared, taking a step forward. In that instant, something inside the puppy changed. His growl deepened. His fur bristled. He moved from behind the table, positioning himself between the man and the girl. His body was small, trembling, but unyielding. The girl's wide eyes reflected his silhouette, a fragile hero in the dark. The man swung the bottle. It missed, shattering against the table leg, sending shards scattering across the floor. Max barked sharply, the sound echoing through the apartment. The man stumbled back, startled for a brief moment. That moment was all it took. A neighbor must have heard the noise, because somewhere down the hallway, someone shouted, "I'm calling the police!" The man cursed. But before he could move, distant sirens began to wail. The sound grew louder, closer, like a promise tearing through the night. The girl didn't understand what it meant. All she knew was that she couldn't breathe, couldn't think. Her mother was crying again, somewhere in the corner, her voice breaking like fragile glass. "Please, stop, please." The sirens screamed. Then came the pounding on the door. "Police, open up!" The man hesitated, his face twisted with rage and fear. He threw a glance toward the table, and toward the girl clutching her bear and her dog. And for a heartbeat, their eyes met. There was no remorse there, only a hollow fury. The next moment, the door burst open. Officers rushed in, flashlights slicing through the dark. Commands filled the room. "Drop it! Hands where we can see them!" And chaos erupted. The man shouted something unintelligible, stumbling backward. The mother sobbed. Max barked once, then again, his tail stiff, his teeth bared. One officer froze for a split second, unsure whether the dog was a threat, but then he saw the girl. Her small body trembled as she clung to Max's fur, her eyes wide and lost. "It's okay," one officer murmured softly as he approached. "Hey there, sweetheart. You're safe now." But she didn't move. Max stood in front of her, chest heaving, protecting her, even as the room filled with uniforms and noise. His gaze followed every movement until, finally, two officers subdued the man and led him away in handcuffs. The mother collapsed to her knees, sobbing uncontrollably. I didn't know he..." But no one was listening. The little girl crawled out from under the table. Her small feet crunched over glass shards, but she didn't seem to feel them. Max walked beside her, his fur brushing against her leg, his eyes never leaving her. One of the officers, a woman with kind eyes, Officer Anna, knelt down and gently placed a hand on the girl's shoulder. "It's over now," she said softly. "You're safe. We've got you. Time 700 moves." The girl looked up, but her face was blank. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. Anna glanced at Max. The puppy's eyes met hers, full of something she couldn't quite name. Loyalty, fear, and a kind of desperate understanding. He nuzzled the girl's hand, letting out a small whimper. She blinked slowly, then reached down, fingers trembling, and rested her palm on his head. In that simple gesture, the noise of the world seemed to fade. Later, when the apartment was filled with the fading hum of police radios and flashing red-blue lights reflected off broken glass, Anna carried the girl outside. The child didn't cry. She didn't speak. She only stared at the night sky, her small body limp in the officer's arms. Max followed behind, led by another officer, his paws wet from the rain. When he saw the girl being placed in the back seat of the patrol car, he barked once, sharply, as if afraid of losing her. Anna turned. "It's okay, boy," she said, steady and calm. "She's safe now." But when she glanced through the car window, her chest tightened. The girl was sitting motionless, staring straight ahead, her hand resting on her lap. Her lips trembled, and then nothing. Not a word, not a sound. That night, As the sirens faded into the distance, a strange silence filled the city once again. A silence that would follow the girl for years to come. A silence born not from fear alone, but from the weight of everything she had seen. And beneath that silence, somewhere deep inside her heart, lived the faint memory of warm fur, steady breathing, and the unwavering eyes of the only friend who had never raised his voice at her. The girl hadn't spoken a word since that night, but Max remembered every sound. The rain had stopped, but the world still felt gray. Morning sunlight pushed weakly through the curtains of the Child Protection Center, spilling pale light across a small bed in the corner of the room. There, a little girl sat motionless, legs drawn up to her chest, her chin resting on her knees. Her eyes, once bright and curious, were dull, fixed on a single spot on the floor. Her name was Lily, though she hadn't spoken it aloud since that night. A tray of untouched breakfast sat beside her. A slice of bread, a small cup of milk, an apple sliced neatly in half. The milk had long gone cold. A social worker knocked softly on the door before stepping inside. "Good morning, sweetheart," she said gently, her voice cautious, as if approaching a frightened bird. "You should try to eat something." Lily didn't move. The woman sighed, sitting down in a chair near the bed. "You know, the people here, we just want to help you. You don't have to be afraid anymore." But fear wasn't the right word anymore. What lingered in Lily's eyes wasn't fear. It was emptiness. A hollow quiet that even comfort couldn't touch. She pressed her plush bear, the same one from that night, closer to her chest. One of its button eyes had fallen off, leaving it with a crooked, lopsided look that made it seem as weary as its owner. In the hallway, 2 psychologists observed through the small window on the door. "She hasn't spoken a single word since she arrived," one whispered. "Not to staff. Not to anyone." The other nodded. "Trauma-induced mutism. It's not uncommon in children who witness extreme violence. She'll need time. Maybe months." They said the words clinically, as if time alone could fix what had been broken. But time, for Lily, had stopped on that night. Time 1200 mums. Later that afternoon, footsteps echoed softly down the hallway. A woman in uniform approached the door, her expression solemn, yet kind. Officer Anna, the K-9 handler who had rescued Lily that night, paused at the doorway, removing her cap. Behind her, the sound of paws tapped lightly against the linoleum floor. "Are you sure about this?" the social worker asked quietly. Anna nodded. "Sometimes, words don't heal what silence can." She stepped inside. Lily didn't look up. Her small body was rigid, withdrawn into itself. Anna stood a few feet away, her voice gentle but firm. "Hey, sweetheart. Do you remember me?" No response. Anna smiled faintly and turned toward the doorway. "It's okay, boy," she said softly. "You can come in." Max stepped forward. His presence filled the room instantly. The German Shepherd was bigger now, stronger, steadier. His black and tan coat gleamed under the light, and his deep brown eyes carried a mix of confidence and calm that only time and training could give. He wore a small K-9 badge on his collar, a symbol of duty. Yet in that moment, he wasn't a police dog. He was something else entirely. Lily's head turned slightly, her eyes catching the soft sound of claws against the floor. When she saw him, really saw him, her breath caught. For a moment she didn't move. Then, slowly, she slid off the bed, her bare feet touching the cool floor. Max stopped a few feet away, ears perked. He waited, tail still, as if afraid any movement might break the fragile air between them. Lily took one small step, then another. Her fingers loosened their grip on the toy bear. It fell to the floor without a sound. She reached out, hesitant at first, then with a trembling certainty, and touched the fur between Max's ears. The world seemed to exhale. Her lips parted, but still, no sound came. Instead, tears rolled silently down her cheeks, tracing thin lines down her pale skin. Max leaned closer, pressing his head gently into her chest. The movement broke whatever wall had been holding her emotions back. She dropped to her knees, arms wrapping around his neck. A muffled sob escaped, quiet, but raw, the kind that comes from somewhere deep, where words no longer exist. Anna's throat tightened. She turned slightly, pretending to adjust her belt, but her eyes glistened. Max stayed still, letting the girl cry into his fur. He didn't move, didn't lick her face, didn't make a sound, just breathed steadily, the warmth of his body anchoring her back to the world. After what felt like forever, Lily's sobs quieted. She stayed there, arms still around him, eyes closed, her small chest rising and falling in rhythm with his. Anna crouched down beside them. Her voice was low, a whisper meant only for the two of them. "You protected her once, Max," she said softly, her hand resting on the dog's back. "Someday, maybe she'll protect you back." Max lifted his head, looking at her with steady eyes, as if understanding every word. Lily opened her eyes, her fingers tightening slightly around his fur. She didn't speak, but for the first time there was something alive in her gaze. That night, after everyone had gone home and the center's hallways grew quiet, Anna sat in her car outside for a long time. The rain had returned, tapping gently against the windshield. Through the foggy glass, she could still see the window of Lily's room on the second floor. The light inside was dim, but she could make out the shadow of a small figure sitting on the bed, and beside it, a larger shadow, curled protectively on the floor. She smiled faintly. "You did good, boy," she murmured, starting the engine. Inside, Lily couldn't sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, flashes of that night came back. The shouting, the broken glass, the smell of fear. But then she felt the quiet rhythm of Max's breathing beside her bed, and the memories softened. The silence didn't seem so heavy anymore. For the first time in days, she reached for the apple slices on her nightstand. She took one small bite, almost mechanical. But it was something. When she was done, she slid down to the floor and lay beside Max, her hand resting on his paw. The lights outside flickered, casting faint patterns on the wall. The world beyond that room could wait. Anna's promise lingered in the air, unheard, but real. "You protected her once, Max. Someday, maybe she'll protect you back." And though Lily couldn't say it aloud, in the quiet rhythm of her breathing, the message was clear. "Thank you for finding me again." Outside, dawn began to break, soft, hesitant, fragile, like hope itself. The morning air was sharp and cold, carrying the faint scent of dew and metal. On the training field behind the police academy, rows of K-9 officers stood in formation, dogs at their sides, steady, alert, and waiting for command. Among them was Max, his fur now darker, his frame taller, his movements more deliberate. Time had changed him, shaping the small, trembling puppy from that stormy night into a creature of discipline and quiet strength. "Sit!" Anna's voice was firm, but calm. Max obeyed instantly, eyes locked on her face. She gave a small nod, a half-smile tugging at her lips. "Good boy." The other handlers often joked that Anna treated her dog like a partner, not a subordinate. But to Anna, Max wasn't just another K9. He was something else entirely. He was the one who had stood between a child and chaos. He had seen pain, understood fear, and yet carried neither bitterness nor aggression. There was something in his eyes, a gentleness that didn't belong to a dog trained for danger. The whistle blew. The drills began. Track! The dogs surged forward, noses low to the ground, following the scent trail left hours earlier. Max's movements were fluid, calculated. Every step guided by instinct, honed into skill. He wove through the course like a shadow, ignoring distractions, until his nose found the hidden object buried beneath the leaves. Good, Max. Anna knelt, rewarding him with a treat and a scratch behind his ears. He wagged his tail once, then sat proudly, tongue lolling, chest heaving from exertion. To anyone watching, it was just another day in training. But for Anna, each session was a conversation, a silent exchange between two beings who understood each other without words. As months turned into years, Max's name began to echo through the precinct. Best nose in the division, one officer said. Never seen a dog that focused, said another. Yet Anna always smiled quietly, thinking to herself that Max's strength didn't just come from training. It came from memory. She remembered the night she first saw him, standing in that ruined apartment, growling through the smoke, to protect a child who couldn't protect herself. That moment had written itself into his soul, and no amount of conditioning could erase it. Training wasn't always glory. It was mud, rain, exhaustion, and repetition. It was the weight of armor, the sting of failure, the endless cycle of commands shouted into the wind. But in those moments, when the world reduced itself to the rhythm of breath and heartbeat, Max seemed at peace. On rescue drills, he crawled through collapsed tunnels, nose searching for trapped victims. He barked 3 times when he found them, the signal for alive. Anna would follow his lead through the debris, her flashlight beam catching the reflection of his steady eyes. Once, during a simulation, a child volunteer pretended to be unconscious under a pile of boards. Max found him within seconds, but instead of barking immediately, he nudged the boy's arm, whining softly before signaling. The instructor frowned, marking it as hesitation, but Anna understood. Later that evening, when the sun was setting and the other officers had gone home, Anna sat beside Max on the field. "You've got a soft spot for kids, huh?" she murmured. Max leaned his head against her knee, tail thumping once against the ground. "I guess some things you never forget." She shared her sandwich with him, tearing the bread in half. "Don't tell the captain," she said with a quiet laugh. "This is the only meal I've had all day." Max took the food gently from her hand. His eyes met hers, calm and knowing. Time off 100. In that gaze, Anna often found a kind of reassurance she didn't get from people. A reminder that even in a job built on danger and loss, there could still be trust, still be grace. Years blurred together in the rhythm of duty. Search operations, patrols, emergencies that began with sirens and ended with silence. Max became a veteran. He had sniffed out hidden narcotics, tracked missing persons through the rain, and once even found an injured hiker buried under snow after 12 hours of searching. Every mission left him with more scars, small patches of fur missing, a faint limp in his back leg from one bad fall. But through it all, Anna remained his constant. They worked as one, 2 halves of the same instinct. She learned to read his body language better than she read her own emotions. The twitch of his ears, the tilt of his head, the pause before a bark, all of it spoke volumes. In the quiet moments between missions, She'd talk to him about things no one else knew. Her doubts, her exhaustion, the cases that haunted her. Max would listen, his gaze unwavering. Sometimes, he'd rest his head in her lap, and she'd think about how much easier life felt when someone simply stayed, without asking for anything in return. It was during one of those late evenings, while cleaning Max's gear, that Anna noticed something unusual. A young boy had wandered into the station lobby, lost, crying softly. Before anyone could approach, Max trotted toward him, tail low, steps careful. Anna froze, ready to call him back, but then she saw it. Max didn't bark. He didn't posture or sniff aggressively. He simply sat in front of the boy and lowered his head, eyes gentle. The child hiccuped through his tears, reached out a small hand, and touched Max's fur. Within seconds, the sobs quieted. The officers nearby exchanged glances. "That's not standard behavior," one said. "Time 400 p.m." Anna only smiled. "No, it's better." When the boy's mother arrived minutes later, she found her son asleep against Max's shoulder. That night, Anna wrote in her report, K9. Max continues to display extraordinary emotional awareness, particularly responsive to children, instinctive empathy, beyond training. But what she didn't write, what she couldn't put into words, was the feeling that Max's compassion came from somewhere far deeper than instinct. It was as if he carried a piece of someone else's pain inside him, something that never healed, but quietly guided him. Maybe dogs remembered more than people gave them credit for. Maybe they remembered not just faces or voices, but the emotions attached to them, the cries, the tremors, the scent of fear. And maybe that was why Max was different. As she turned off the lights that night, Anna looked over at Max, sleeping peacefully in his kennel. His chest rose and fell with slow, steady breaths. For a fleeting second, she thought she saw the faint reflection of a child's hand in his fur, the shadow of a memory that had shaped them both. "Rest well, partner," she whispered. "We've still got a lot of work to do." Max stirred, tail flicking once in acknowledgement, even in sleep. Outside, the moon climbed higher, silver light spilling across the quiet field where countless footprints marked the earth. Among them, one set of paw prints stood out, firm, steady, and leading forward. Because even beneath discipline, beneath the badges and drills, Max carried something no training could ever give him. A heart that remembered why it learned to protect in the first place. 5 years had passed since that night. The night the sirens screamed, and silence stole a little girl's voice. Time had stretched and folded over itself, softening memories, but never erasing them. The city had changed. New buildings, new lights, new people. But some memories refused to fade. They waited, quietly, until life circled back. It was a gray morning, when fate decided to knock again. Inside the courthouse, polished floors reflected nervous footsteps. Voices murmured in hushed tones. Papers rustled. Somewhere, a child cried softly. The case was a grim one. Another domestic abuse trial. The accused, a man with a record, a familiar name. Anna froze when she saw it printed on the file. Daniel Kerrigan. Her pulse slowed. She hadn't heard that name in years, but it crawled back like a shadow she thought she'd left behind. She glanced down at the folder again, at the notes attached. Multiple counts of assault. Victim, minor. Witness, prior victim, now age 12. A soft chill ran down her spine. "Witness is here," a court officer said, breaking her trance. Anna looked up and saw her. The girl had grown taller, her features sharper, but her eyes unmistakable. The same hazel shade, the same quiet intensity. She sat in the waiting area, her small hands gripping the edge of her seat, knuckles white. Her school uniform looked too neat for how nervous she was. Her shoes, polished, but tapping anxiously, betrayed her fear. Lily. The name formed in Anna's mind like a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. She walked slowly toward her, careful not to startle her. "Hey," Anna said softly, her voice almost the same tone she'd used years ago in that shelter. "You might not remember me." Lily looked up. Her gaze was guarded at first, distant, but something flickered there. Recognition. Maybe even warmth. "You're the police lady," she whispered, her voice small, but present. Anna smiled faintly. "That's me." It had been years since Anna had last heard her voice. Just hearing it now, fragile, real, was enough to make her throat tighten. The prosecutor approached, flipping through his notes. "We'll need her ready soon," he said quietly. "She'll have to face him on the stand." Anna's smile faltered. "She's just a kid." "She's our only direct witness," he replied, lowering his voice. "Her testimony could make or break this case." Lily's shoulders tensed. She looked toward the heavy courtroom doors, the same way a bird might look at the sky, right before realizing there's no way out. "He's in there, isn't he?" she asked softly. Anna crouched beside her, lowering her voice. "You're safe here, Lily. No one can hurt you now." But Lily shook her head. "He's not afraid of anyone. He never was." Her words weren't angry. They were matter of fact, quiet, like someone reciting the truth of gravity. Anna hesitated, then stood. "Wait here a second, okay?" She walked out into the hallway, her hand brushing against the cool metal railing. Her mind spun. She knew what trauma could do to a person, the way it hid in corners of memory, waiting for a familiar sound to drag it back into the light. Asking Lily to relive it was like asking her to open a wound that had barely scarred over. Then, as if answering an unspoken thought, she heard a faint bark echo from down the hall. "Max." Anna turned. There he was, sitting patiently by the security checkpoint. His ears perked, tail low. Regulations didn't allow dogs inside the courtroom without clearance, but Anna knew. Rules sometimes bent for the right reasons. As soon as Max saw her, his tail thumped once against the floor, eyes brightening with the kind of recognition only loyalty could carry. "You remember, don't you?" she murmured, kneeling beside him. "She's here. The girl you saved." He tilted his head, as if understanding. Moments later, Anna led him quietly back through the hallway. When Lily looked up and saw the dog, her breath caught. Her lips parted, but no sound came. Then her chair scraped slightly as she stood, almost without realizing. Max walked toward her slowly, his steps measured. He was older now, muzzle dusted with gray, gait deliberate. But his eyes, they were the same. Warm, certain. The world seemed to stop for a heartbeat. Lily knelt down and reached for him. Her hands trembled as they met his fur, and for a long moment, neither of them moved. Then quietly, she whispered, "You came back." Anna looked away for a second, blinking hard. Lily hugged Max tightly, burying her face in his neck. The scent of fur, leather, and faint traces of soap filled her lungs. For the first time since entering the courthouse, she breathed deeply. The fear didn't vanish, but it shifted, softened, like ice under morning light. Anna crouched beside them. "He never forgot you," she said gently. Lily smiled faintly through her tears. "I never forgot him either." For the next hour, while the court prepared, Lily sat with Max. She ran her fingers through his fur, whispered things only he could hear, fragments of old memories, apologies, and thanks. Max listened, his head resting across her knees, eyes half closed, in quiet understanding. When the bailiff finally called her name, Lily froze again. Her hand clenched around Max's collar. I can't," she whispered. "He'll look at me." Anna placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Then don't look at him," she said softly. "Just look at Max. He's with you. Every second." The girl swallowed hard, then nodded. Slowly, she stood, her small frame trembling, but upright. Max followed at her side, his presence steadying her like an anchor. When they entered the courtroom, conversations paused. The judge glanced up, surprised. "Is that a police K-9? "Yes, Your Honor," Anna said respectfully. "With the court's permission, he's here to assist the witness." The judge raised an eyebrow, but said nothing more. "Proceed." Lily walked to the witness stand, Max settling at her feet. Her hands shook as she took the oath, voice barely audible. The moment she looked up and saw him, that man, her breath hitched, her body stiffened, Anna's heart clenched. But then, Max lifted his head, pressing his chin against Lily's shoe, a silent reminder that she wasn't alone. She reached down, touched his ear, and took a breath. When she finally spoke, her voice quivered, but it carried a strength that hadn't been there before. "I know what he did," she said softly, "because I saw it once, and I survived it." Anna's eyes met Max's across the room. In that moment, she understood something she hadn't before. The past hadn't returned to haunt them. It had returned to demand courage, from both the girl who had learned to speak again and the dog who had never stopped listening. And in that quiet courtroom, with truth trembling on a child's lips and loyalty resting at her feet, courage didn't roar, it whispered. But it was enough. The air in the courtroom felt thick, heavy with curiosity and cynicism. Every seat in the public gallery was filled. Reporters sat poised with pens ready, cameras silently waiting for something, anything that could turn this otherwise grim case into a headline. "The State versus Daniel Kerrigan," the clerk's voice rang out. The echo faded into the murmur of voices and the faint hum of the air conditioning. At the front, the judge adjusted his glasses, flipping through a stack of papers with methodical precision. His expression was neutral, but there was a faint smirk tugging at the corner of his mouth, as if he'd already decided this would be another tedious day. Anna sat a few rows behind the prosecutor's table, uniform pressed, posture straight. But her eyes were focused only on one thing, the small, fragile figure sitting beside her lawyer. Lily. At 12, she looked even smaller in the oversized witness chair, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Her dark hair had been pulled back neatly, but a few strands had fallen loose, framing a face pale with nerves. She hadn't said a word since they entered. Her breathing was shallow, her gaze fixed on the table before her, afraid to look anywhere else, especially toward the man sitting across from her. Daniel Kerrigan sat there in his suit, calm, composed, even smug. His hands were folded, his mouth curved into something that might have been mistaken for politeness, if not for the cold glint in his eyes. He looked at Lily the way a predator watches its prey, silently daring her to speak. Anna's hand curled into a fist. The prosecutor stood, clearing his throat. Your Honor, before we begin, I'd like to address the court regarding a special request. The defense attorney, a sharp-featured man in an expensive gray suit, raised an eyebrow. Ah, yes, he interrupted with a faint chuckle. The matter of the dog, was it? Laughter rippled softly through the room. The judge arched a brow. A dog? Yes, Your Honor, the prosecutor replied firmly. The witness suffers from post-traumatic stress and selective mutism as a result of past abuse by the defendant. The presence of the K-9 officer involved in the original case has proven. The defense lawyer held up a hand, grinning. Forgive me, Your Honor, but are we seriously suggesting that a dog be allowed to enter a federal courtroom? What's next? A therapy cat to help the jury deliberate. The audience chuckled again. Even a few journalists smirked behind their notebooks. The prosecutor's jaw tightened. This is not a joke, counselor. This child's ability to testify depends on her sense of safety. The defense leaned on the table. And I suppose safety now comes with a leash. A low murmur spread through the room. The judge sighed, rubbing his temples. All right, enough. We'll discuss that in a moment. Let's not turn this into a circus. Anna's stomach twisted. She'd known there would be pushback, but she hadn't expected this level of mockery. Not when a child's courage was at stake. Lily's breathing quickened. Her fingers dug into the wooden edge of the chair. The sound of the defense lawyer's laughter made her shoulders tremble. She lowered her head even further, wishing she could disappear. The judge finally looked up, glancing between the lawyers. The witness may have emotional difficulties, I understand, but I must question the precedent of allowing an animal into these proceedings. This is a court of law, not— He trailed off, giving a small laugh that echoed faintly in the tense silence. Not a daycare. The sound of his laughter wasn't cruel, but it was dismissive, casual. The kind of laugh that stripped dignity from something fragile. Anna's jaw clenched. From behind the bench, a few journalists began scribbling furiously. Camera shutters clicked. Somewhere in the gallery, someone whispered, "They really brought a dog for the girl?" Followed by another's quiet snicker. Lily flinched at the word dog. Her head lifted slightly, her lips parting as if to speak, but no sound came out. The prosecutor tried again. Your Honor, this is not an ordinary K-9. Officer Max is an active-duty police service dog. His record includes multiple successful operations and— Still a dog, the defense interrupted smoothly, tapping his pen against the table. And last I checked, dogs can't testify. This time the laughter was louder. Even the judge's expression cracked into an amused smile. Counselor, he said, trying to sound stern but failing, you do make a point. Anna stood abruptly. Your Honor, if I may. The room fell quiet. The judge looked mildly surprised. And you are? Officer Anna Reyes, K-9 unit, Max's handler. The judge leaned back. Officer Reyes, I appreciate your enthusiasm, but surely you understand that bringing an animal into this environment— With respect, sir, Anna interrupted, voice steady. Max isn't just an animal. He's part of this case. Without him, this girl might not be alive to testify today. The murmurs in the gallery died instantly. Even the defense lawyer lowered his pen. Anna's eyes softened as she looked toward Lily. 5 years ago, Max found her hiding in the dark. He stood between her and the man who hurt her. She hasn't spoken about that night since, but when she saw Max again, she started to find her voice. The courtroom fell silent. The judge's gaze lingered on her, his smirk fading just slightly. And you believe his presence will help her testify? I know it will, Anna replied quietly, because he's the only one she trusts to keep her safe. For a long moment the judge said nothing. The ticking of the courtroom clock grew painfully loud. Finally, he sighed. This is highly irregular, but fine. Let's proceed. He looked toward Lily, who sat frozen, pale, her voice trapped in her throat. Young lady, he said, trying to soften his tone. We'll begin shortly. Take your time. But Lily didn't move. Her gaze was fixed on the empty doorway, where she knew Max was waiting outside. Her lips trembled. Daniel Kerrigan leaned back in his chair, a smirk tugging at his mouth. He looked at her the way he once did years ago, like he still had power. The sight made her stomach twist with dread. Anna's eyes flicked toward the hallway. She could hear faint scratching on the floor, the quiet shuffle of paws, waiting for command. She took a breath. The judge, unaware, adjusted his robe and muttered, "All this trouble for a dog." He chuckled again, the sound brief but sharp. Let's proceed. The bailiff called for order. Reporters lifted their cameras, and outside, Max stood, unmoving, waiting for the sound of his name. He didn't know that in a few short moments, his entrance would change everything, that the laughter echoing through the courtroom would soon die into silence. For now, though, the world still didn't believe. The girl sat frozen. The judge laughed, and justice waited, quietly, just beyond the door. The courtroom doors creaked open, with a low, deliberate groan that sliced through the restless murmur. Every head turned. For a split second, even the clicking cameras went still. Then, he appeared. Max. He stepped inside, his black and tan coat gleaming faintly under the cold fluorescence. Each paw hit the floor with measured precision. The quiet tap, tap, echoing through the vast space. He moved with the unhurried grace of a soldier who had seen too much to be intimidated by noise. Beside him walked Officer Anna, posture straight, face unreadable. The tension was immediate. Half the courtroom looked intrigued. The other half smirked. "Is this really happening?" someone whispered. "Must be some kind of stunt," another murmured. The defense lawyer leaned toward his client, grinning. "There's your big, scary dog." Daniel Kerrigan didn't smile. His eyes, dark, calculating, narrowed. He shifted slightly in his seat, fingers tightening around the armrest. At the witness stand, Lily's small body stiffened. She hadn't looked up since taking her seat. But now something, an instinct, a memory, made her raise her eyes. And there he was. Max. For a heartbeat, she forgot to breathe. The world around her, the murmuring spectators, the shuffle of papers, the harsh overhead lights, all of it blurred, until only one thing remained clear: the steady rhythm of his paws as he walked closer. Anna stopped just short of the stand. She gave a respectful nod to the judge. "Your Honor," she said quietly, "Officer Max, reporting." It was meant to be a small gesture, a formality, but something about the words, said with such conviction, made even the most skeptical reporter lower his pen. The judge cleared his throat. "Very well. Proceed." Max sat obediently beside Lily's chair, eyes scanning the room, calm, controlled. But beneath that discipline, something ancient flickered, an awareness, a purpose that couldn't be trained or commanded. The laughter started small, a few chuckles from the gallery, a cough. That wasn't a cough. Even the defense attorney allowed himself a smirk, leaning back with his arms crossed. "Well," he said under his breath, "at least the witness has moral support." But Max didn't react. He didn't move. He just looked straight ahead, his ears twitching, his gaze steady, until it found the man sitting at the defense table. It happened slowly, like gravity taking hold of the room. Max's body went still, his ears tilted forward, nostrils flaring slightly, as if catching a scent long buried under time and distance. His pupils narrowed. The smirk on Daniel's face faltered. The accused leaned back instinctively, that casual arrogance draining from his expression for the first time that day. He looked unsure. The air shifted, thickening, charged. Even those who had been laughing seconds earlier felt it. Lily noticed it too. She could feel the change in Max's breathing, the sudden stiffness in his posture. Her heart began to pound in her chest. Her gaze followed his, and then she saw him, her stepfather, older, sharper, still wearing that same smirk. She remembered from the nights that never ended. Something cracked inside her. She tried to look away, but the memories hit all at once. The smell of alcohol, the shouting, the crash of breaking glass, Max's bark, echoing through the dark. Her vision blurred. She reached for the edge of the stand, gripping it with both hands, as tears welled in her eyes. "Lily?" Anna's voice was soft, careful. "You're okay. He can't hurt you." But Lily wasn't hearing the courtroom anymore. She was back in that small apartment, the same voice, the same rage, the same cruelty. Only this time, there were people watching, people who might believe her. Her lips trembled. She opened her mouth, but her voice came out as a whisper, broken and shaking. The defense lawyer looked up sharply. "Your Honor, I must object if he hit Max too." Her words cut through him like a blade. For a moment, no one moved. The air hung still, the weight of the sentence too real to process. Then, all at once, the courtroom erupted. Gasps echoed. Reporters leaned forward, pens scratching furiously. The judge's eyes widened. His hand froze mid-turn of a page. The defense attorney stammered, half rising from his seat. "What? What did she just say?" someone whispered. Anna stepped closer, her heart pounding. Lily's face was wet with tears, her shoulders trembling, but her eyes, those frightened eyes, were locked on Daniel. "He hit Max too," she said again, louder this time, each word trembling, but clear. Daniel's composure shattered. His jaw tightened. A bead of sweat rolled down his temple. "That's a lie," he snapped suddenly, voice cracking. The judge looked up sharply. "Mr. Kerrigan, you will remain silent." But it was too late. The mask had slipped. Everyone saw it. The flicker of guilt. The flash of fear. Max stood slowly, muscles tense. His gaze didn't waver from the man's face. And then, in a sound that filled every inch of the courtroom, he barked. It wasn't loud. It wasn't violent. It was deep, resonant, like thunder rolling through a hollow valley. The laughter stopped. Every whisper, every click of a pen, every rustle of paper, gone. Max's bark echoed once, then faded into the stunned silence. He stood tall, head high, tail low, a guardian unyielding in purpose. It wasn't aggression. It was recognition. The judge straightened, lips parting slightly. The defense attorney swallowed hard, his earlier arrogance evaporating. And Daniel Kerrigan. He sat frozen, face drained of color, his breath coming fast and uneven. His eyes darted around the room, searching for disbelief, denial, anything, but found only silent faces staring back. Even the judge couldn't find his voice at first. When he finally spoke, it was softer, reverent almost. "Officer Reyes," he said quietly, "control your dog." Anna placed a hand on Max's collar. He sat down immediately, obedient once more. But the silence he left behind was deafening. The judge cleared his throat, straightened his robe, and looked toward the girl on the stand. His voice had lost all trace of amusement. "You may proceed, miss." Lily wiped her cheeks, her small shoulders shaking. "He hurt me," she whispered. "And when Max tried to stop him, he hurt him too." The courtroom stayed silent. Even the cameras had stopped clicking. Anna's heart ached, pride and sorrow intertwining in her chest. She knelt beside Max, whispering so only he could hear. "You did good, boy." Max didn't move. His eyes were still locked on the man who once stood in the dark, with a bottle and cruelty in his hands. The truth had been buried in silence for 5 years. But now, it had a voice. Time for him, and it barked. The silence that followed Max's bark seemed to last forever. It was as if time itself had stopped, holding its breath in awe and disbelief. The echoes faded slowly into the high corners of the courtroom, until all that remained was the faint hum of the fluorescent lights. Lily sat trembling in the witness stand, her small hands gripping the edge of the wooden rail so tightly, her knuckles turned white. She looked at Max, her protector, her living memory, and then at the man who had once made her life a cage of fear. Something deep inside her broke open. Years of silence cracked, and the words she had buried since childhood began to rise. The prosecutor took a cautious step forward. "Lily," he said softly, "can you tell us what happened that night?" Her lips quivered. For a moment she couldn't speak. The entire courtroom seemed to lean closer, waiting. Then, in a voice that trembled, but grew stronger with each word, she began. He used to come home late," she whispered. "He smelled like alcohol. He'd yell at my mom first, then at me." She swallowed hard, her throat tightening. "Sometimes, when I cried, he'd grab whatever was near, plates, cups, anything. One night, he threw a glass. It broke right next to me. 'Max,' he barked. He was just a puppy, but he stood in front of me. He didn't move even when—" Her voice cracked. The prosecutor waited, giving her time. Anna, seated nearby, clenched her hands together, fighting the urge to intervene. Lily took a deep breath. "Even when he hit him, with a belt, again and again." Gasps rippled through the courtroom. A woman in the gallery covered her mouth. A reporter lowered his pen. Lily's tears fell freely now. Max didn't run. He just stood there, growling. He looked at me, like he was saying it was okay, like he'd take it instead of me. Her words trembled, but they pierced through every corner of the room, like shards of glass. Anna's throat tightened. She remembered that night, the broken furniture, the shattered glass, the trembling girl clutching a torn bear. But she hadn't known everything. She hadn't known about the belt. The prosecutor nodded gently. "And what happened next, Lily?" She wiped her face with her sleeve. "He kicked Max, hard. Max fell, but he got up again. He ran in front of me. I tried to scream, but I couldn't. I wanted him to stop, but the words wouldn't come out." Her small hand reached down toward Max's fur now, fingers trembling as they brushed against his ear. He looked up at her, calm, steady, his presence grounding her the way it had 5 years ago. "I remember hiding under the table," she whispered. "It was dark, and everything hurt. Max was bleeding from his side, but he still lay there, covering me with his body. He didn't move until the police came. Anna closed her eyes. She remembered that sight vividly now. A small child under the table, a trembling puppy standing guard, glass on the floor, and the man's drunken rage echoing in the air. The prosecutor's voice broke the silence. Your Honor, with the court's permission, we would like to submit evidence obtained from the original investigation, photographs and veterinary records. The judge nodded solemnly. Proceed. A projector flickered to life, casting faded images onto the wall. The first photo appeared, a small girl sitting on a hospital bed, bruises on her arms, and a thin cut above her eyebrow. The next, a German shepherd puppy, with a shaved patch of fur along his ribs, a stitched wound visible beneath the bandages. A collective breath was drawn across the room. Even the defense attorney, usually so composed, looked away. These, the prosecutor said quietly, were taken on the same night. The medical records confirm both injuries occurred within the same hour. The veterinarian's notes describe the wound as consistent with blunt force trauma. He let that sentence hang. The judge leaned back in his chair, expression unreadable, but eyes glassy. Anna stared at the photos, her jaw tight. She had seen countless crime scenes, but nothing struck her like this. The juxtaposition of innocence and cruelty. Of a little girl and a bleeding dog, bound together in fear. Lily's voice came again, softer this time. He told me no one would believe me if I said anything. He said dogs don't talk. And I stopped talking too. A tear slipped down Anna's cheek before she could stop it. The judge's gavel came down once, lightly, not for order, but to steady himself. Please continue, miss. Lily nodded. After the police came, I remember Anna taking me outside. The lights were bright. Max tried to follow, but they pulled him away. I screamed, but no sound came out. I thought I'd never see him again. She turned to look at Anna now, her eyes shimmering with gratitude. But you brought him back. You didn't forget him. Anna swallowed hard. Neither did he. The courtroom stayed still. The prosecutor cleared his throat gently, his voice thick. Your Honor, I'd like the record to note that this child's testimony aligns with the original physical evidence, the veterinary report, and prior witness statements from the responding officers. The defense lawyer tried to object, his voice shaky. Your Honor, these are emotionally charged statements, not— Sit down, the judge interrupted, his voice firmer now. Let her finish. The lawyer hesitated, then sank back into his seat, defeated. Lily took another breath. Her voice wavered, but she didn't stop. After that night, I couldn't talk for a long time. I thought if I stayed quiet, nothing bad would happen again. But when I saw Max, I remembered. He never stopped protecting me. So maybe I don't have to be scared anymore. Tears filled Anna's eyes. Across the gallery, a few people wiped theirs away. The prosecutor lowered his gaze, pretending to adjust his notes. The judge, who had laughed once at the idea of a dog in his courtroom, now sat with his hands clasped tightly together, his expression solemn. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, almost reverent. This court thanks you, Miss Kerrigan. You've shown more courage than most adults ever could. Lily nodded faintly, her voice no more than a whisper. I just wanted him to stop hurting anyone else. The judge inhaled deeply, his eyes glistening. You may step down. She stood slowly, one hand still resting on Max's head. As she walked past the defense table, Daniel Kerrigan wouldn't look up. His once cocky posture had wilted into something smaller, cornered, exposed. Max stayed by her side until she reached Anna. Only then did he sit, calm and resolute, his head lifted high, and in that stillness, a girl's trembling truth, a dog's unwavering loyalty, and the undeniable weight of justice, the courtroom found its silence again. But this time, it wasn't the silence of fear. It was the silence that follows truth. Heavy, cleansing, unforgettable. The courtroom had fallen into a hush so deep that even the faint creak of the wooden benches seemed too loud. The judge finally called for a short recess to allow the witness and the attorneys to recover. But as people rose and stretched, whispering in clusters of hushed tones, one figure remained unmoved. Lily sat on the witness stand, small hands folded in her lap. Her eyes were red from crying, her breathing uneven, but she hadn't moved an inch. The moment she stopped talking, it was as if her body had turned to stone. The weight of memory still clung to her shoulders. Anna watched from the side of the room, one hand resting lightly on Max's collar. The dog sat at her heel, calm but alert. His gaze was locked on the girl, his entire body quietly tuned to her trembling. He could sense the storm still swirling inside her. When the judge stepped away from the bench and the lawyers gathered their notes, Anna gave a subtle nod. "Go on, boy," she whispered. Max trotted forward. His paws clicked softly against the tile as he crossed the floor toward the witness stand. The sound was small, but somehow powerful, drawing every pair of eyes in the room. Lily looked up just as he reached her, her breath caught in her throat. She didn't speak, Shuon. She didn't need to. Max sat down beside her, pressed his body against the base of the witness box, and then, without a command or cue, he lay down, his head lowered gently until it rested across her lap. A ripple of emotion moved through the courtroom. Even those who'd been skeptical before, the reporters, the jurors, the bystanders, sat in silence, watching. Lily's small hand trembled once, then found its way to the top of his head. She stroked his fur, slow and rhythmic, as if reassuring herself that he was real. The tension in her shoulders eased. Her lips moved, silently, whispering something only he could hear. Anna swallowed hard. There were moments in her career that demanded bravery, running into dark alleys, facing armed suspects, chasing danger without hesitation. But nothing had ever felt as brave as this. A child learning how to breathe again, beside a dog who refused to leave her. The defense attorney broke the silence first. He stood, smoothing the wrinkles from his suit. "Your Honor," he said with forced calm, "I must object to this display. While I understand the emotional impact, this is a courtroom, not a theater." The judge looked over his glasses, unimpressed. "What exactly is your objection, counselor?" The lawyer gestured toward Max. "The animal's behavior is clearly the result of specialized training. It's conditioned to respond to distress, to dramatize loyalty. It's meant to sway the jury emotionally, rather than provide any factual relevance." His voice was steady, but the words rang hollow. Even he knew how weak they sounded against the scene before him. Anna stood, straightening her uniform. Her voice when she spoke was quiet, but firm. "With respect, Your Honor, training can teach obedience. It can teach restraint, alertness, response. But it can't teach this." She nodded toward Max, who now adjusted his position slightly, pressing closer to the girl's knees. His eyes were half closed, calm, trusting. "This isn't performance," Anna continued. "This is memory, He remembers her scent, her fear, the way she cried that night. You can't train memory, and you can't fake love. The judge's pen froze mid-note. The gallery was utterly still. The defense attorney opened his mouth to counter, but the words refused to come. He shifted uncomfortably, tugged at his tie, then sat back down. Lily didn't notice any of it. She was still running her fingers through Max's fur, her tears now quiet, peaceful instead of frantic. Every once in a while, he'd lift his head slightly, as if to make sure she was still there, then settle back down. A young juror near the end of the box dabbed her eyes with a tissue. Another man cleared his throat roughly, pretending to adjust his glasses. The bailiff, who had seen everything from hardened criminals to grieving mothers, stood silently by the door, his jaw tight. He wasn't immune either. Then, breaking the silence, the judge spoke, but his tone was different now. The earlier edge of formality had softened. "You may call it instinct," he said quietly, his gaze lingering on Max. "But I've been in this courtroom for 30 years, and I've never seen loyalty written so clearly, in silence." Anna said nothing. She didn't need to. The judge leaned back in his chair, his eyes misted. "Sometimes," he murmured, almost to himself, "justice doesn't speak. It remembers." The words hung in the air like a benediction. Lily looked up, uncertain. "What does that mean?" she whispered. The judge smiled faintly. "It means," he said, his voice gentle now, "that the truth doesn't always need words." Lily looked down at Max again. His tail gave a slow, steady thump against the floor. 1, 2, and stopped. His breathing was calm, his head heavy on her lap, his eyes half closed. That was all the truth anyone needed. When court reconvened 10 minutes later, no one dared to laugh or whisper. The tone of the room had shifted completely. The once skeptical jurors sat straighter, their gazes steady. The reporters no longer looked for headlines. They looked for understanding. Even the judge, who once found humor in the idea of a dog in his courtroom, now treated every word, every silence, with reverence. Lily was asked to remain while the next round of testimonies began. But Max stayed too. No one objected this time, not even the defense. Time 8 in Harlem. As the prosecutor resumed questioning, the rhythm of the courtroom returned, but the energy had changed. Every eye returned, again and again, to the image that anchored the room. A girl and a German shepherd, bound by a story too pure to be argued, too human to be dismissed. Max didn't move again, until Lily finally exhaled. The long, shuddering breath of someone who had been holding the world inside for too long. He lifted his head briefly, as if acknowledging the shift, then rested it once more on her knees. The sound of the judge's gavel came at last, a soft, singular strike that didn't mark the end of an argument, but the beginning of understanding. And in that heart-wrenching stillness, where truth breathed through silence and loyalty stood taller than law, everyone in the room knew. The dog hadn't just protected her life, he had protected her voice. And that was a kind of testimony no human could ever give. The courtroom was different that morning. There was no chatter, no laughter, no cynical whispers, only the soft rustle of papers and the occasional creak of wooden benches as people shifted in their seats. The air felt heavy, as though everyone inside could sense that something final, something irreversible, was about to unfold. Sunlight filtered weakly through the tall windows, painting pale stripes across the floor where Max lay at Lily's feet. He was calm, his head resting on his paws, eyes half closed, tail still. Every now and then, He looked up toward her, as if reading her heartbeat. Lily sat beside Anna at the front row, her hands clasped tightly together in her lap. She looked older than 12 in that moment, not because of time, but because of everything she'd survived. The faint tremor in her fingers betrayed her nerves, but her chin was lifted, her eyes steady. Across the room, Daniel Kerrigan sat hunched at the defense table, his expression hollow. The smirk he once wore was gone. His lawyer spoke in hushed, desperate tones, but Daniel didn't seem to hear him. The walls were closing in now, and for the first time in his life, he looked small, insignificant. The door behind the bench opened. The judge entered. Everyone rose. The shuffle of feet filled the room, then stilled into silence as the judge took his seat. "Be seated." The sound of chairs scraping echoed faintly, then vanished again. The clerk handed a folded piece of paper to the bailiff, who walked it to the judge's desk. The judge unfolded it slowly, the paper crisp in the still air. His eyes scanned the words once, then again. Anna could feel her pulse in her throat. She glanced at Lily, who was clutching the edge of her seat. Max lifted his head, sensing the tension in the room. The judge cleared his throat. "In the case of the state versus Daniel Kerrigan, on the charges of child abuse, assault, and obstruction of justice." The pause stretched like a held breath. "The jury finds the defendant guilty." The word fell, like thunder in a silent sky. For a moment, no one moved. No one spoke. It was as though time itself froze, suspended in the gravity of that single word. Then, like a slow wave breaking, the silence began to tremble, not with noise but with emotion. Lily exhaled, her entire body shaking. Her eyes widened, then filled with tears. The dam she had built inside her heart for 5 long years finally broke. She turned to Anna, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's over, right?" Anna nodded, tears glinting in her own eyes. "Yes, sweetheart, it's over." At those words, Lily dropped to her knees beside Max, her arms wrapped around his neck, burying her face in his fur. Her shoulders trembled as she whispered, "We're safe now, Max. We're really safe." The dog didn't move, but his tail brushed the floor once, softly, a small sound, in the silence. He pressed his head gently against her chest, eyes closing. Across the aisle, Lily's mother began to cry. Not the sharp, panicked sobs of a woman broken by fear, but the kind that comes when something inside finally heals. She covered her face with trembling hands, shoulders shaking as years of guilt and grief poured out. A female officer reached out, resting a hand on her shoulder. The prosecutor, who had fought for this moment for months, closed his file quietly, his jaw tight. Even he couldn't hide the moisture in his eyes. The defense attorney sighed heavily, removing his glasses. His voice was small when he spoke. "We'll file for appeal. Time is 1400 Mampong." But even he didn't believe it. The judge set his papers down. "Mr. Kerrigan," he said gravely, his voice echoing through the room, "you have not only violated the law, you have betrayed the basic decency every human being owes another. But what stands out most in this case isn't your cruelty. It's the courage that stood against it." He looked toward Lily. His expression softened. "Miss Kerrigan, you've given this court something rare. Truth, spoken with bravery. I hope you understand what that means." Lily nodded slightly, still holding Max. The judge's gaze lowered to the German shepherd lying quietly beside her. "And as for you, Officer Max, A faint smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. Seems justice sometimes wears fur. The courtroom erupted, not in noise, but in emotion. A wave of quiet tears and muffled sniffles spread across the room. Even the reporters, who had come expecting a sensational story, sat stunned by the tenderness of what they were witnessing. Camera shutters began to click softly. The flash captured a moment that would soon spread everywhere. A girl in a simple dress, kneeling beside a loyal dog, her small hands tangled in his fur, tears shining like sunlight on water. It wasn't an image of victory. It was something purer. Survival. Love. Justice intertwined. Anna stood behind them, watching. Pride and sorrow tangled in her chest until she couldn't tell one from the other. She thought about the first time she'd seen Lily, silent, broken, hiding behind a trembling puppy. And now here she was, still small, but unshaken. Her voice reborn through the very creature that had once protected her. She took a deep breath, fighting the lump in her throat. "Good job, partner," she whispered. Max's ears twitched. He turned his head slightly toward her voice, eyes bright and knowing. The bailiff approached Daniel Kerrigan. The clink of handcuffs cut through the quiet, sharp, metallic, final. As he was led away, Daniel glanced back once. His gaze landed on the girl and the dog. What he saw wasn't fear anymore. It was something stronger, something that made him look away. The door closed behind him. For the first time in years, Lily didn't flinch at the sound. Outside, the courthouse steps were crowded with journalists, cameras flashing as people spilled out. Reporters spoke into microphones, their voices trembling slightly. A verdict that moved the nation. A child's testimony and a police dog's loyalty bring justice to light. But inside, in the quiet after the storm, it wasn't the noise of the world that mattered. It was the stillness, the steady heartbeat of peace finally returning. Anna knelt beside Lily and Max, brushing a tear from the girl's cheek. "You did it," she said softly. "You both did." Lily leaned against her, exhausted, but smiling through tears. "He's my hero," Anna smiled. "Mine too." The judge rose from the bench, gathering his papers. Before leaving, he looked once more toward the three of them, the officer, the girl, and the dog, and gave a quiet nod, a gesture of respect that needed no words. As the courtroom emptied, sunlight grew stronger through the tall windows, bathing the floor in golden light. The shadows that once haunted this room seemed to fade with it. And there, at the center of it all, was the image that would never be forgotten. A child and her protector, side by side. No longer victims, but survivors. The moment wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It was pure, still, and unshakably human. Because sometimes, justice doesn't roar. Sometimes, it simply breathes in the quiet, between a girl and her dog. The courthouse was quiet now, its echoes long faded. The headlines were gone, but for Anna, Lily, and Max, the memories remained, soft and enduring. Spring had turned to summer. At the K9 division yard, sunlight spilled over the grass, where officers trained new dogs. Max stood in the middle, older now, gray touching his muzzle, but his calm, wise eyes unchanged. That afternoon, under the oak tree, the department gathered for a quiet ceremony. No cameras, just respect. The captain read aloud, In recognition of outstanding service and courage, the city honors Officer Max for loyalty, bravery, and protection of the innocent. He clipped a small gold medal to Max's collar. The dog blinked, tail flicking, unaware of the meaning, but content beside those he trusted. Anna laughed softly, patting his shoulder. "You have no idea what that means, do you, partner?" As the crowd dispersed, a young voice called out, "Officer Anna!" Lily came running, her hair longer, her smile open and bright. She carried a small folder. "I made something for him." Inside were colored pencil drawings, Max in his vest, in court, with his medal gleaming. Max sniffed them, licking the corner, and Lily giggled. "See? He approves," Anna said. Lily knelt beside Max. "Hi, Max. You remember me, right?" His tail wagged once, before he pressed his nose to her cheek. "You're still my hero," she whispered. The world around them faded to quiet, just wind, sun, and the rhythm of trust. Anna watched, her heart full. Justice, she thought, wasn't only gavels and verdicts. Sometimes it was this, a heartbeat against fur. She crouched beside them. "People say justice is a system," she murmured, smiling. "But sometimes it has fur, and it barks." Lily grinned. "And sometimes it has a big heart." They stayed like that, bathed in golden light. Lily talked about school and new friends. Max listened, eyes half closed, at peace. Anna whispered to him, "She doesn't need you to protect her anymore." But Max didn't move. His love went beyond duty. As the sun dipped low, Anna said, "Come on, boy, time to go home." But Max stayed at Lily's feet. "He can stay a little longer, can't he?" she asked. Anna smiled. "I don't think I could stop him, if I tried." When it was time, Lily hugged him tightly. "I'll visit again soon." His tail thumped once, in reply. As she walked away, Anna rested her hand on his shoulder. "You did good, partner. You didn't just find justice. You helped build it." They sat together as dusk fell, peace settling over the field. Justice, Anna realized, wasn't always written in verdicts or medals, but in the quiet calm left behind, the kind that healed what once was broken. As the last light faded, Max rested his head against her boot, breathing steady and sure, no longer guarding from fear, only love. The world was still, and justice at last had found its gentlest form. In the end, this story isn't just about justice. It's about love. The kind of love that doesn't need words. The kind that stands guard when the world turns dark. German shepherds like Max remind us that loyalty isn't taught. It's felt, lived, and given freely. They show us what courage looks like when wrapped in fur and silence. If you've ever looked into your dog's eyes and felt understood without saying a thing, you already know the bond I'm talking about. It's something sacred, the quiet promise between hearts that simply choose to trust each other. If you'd like to nurture that connection even more, there's a wonderful resource I came across that helps deepen the bond between people and their dogs. I'll leave the link below. Take a look when you have a quiet moment. And as you do, maybe give your dog an extra hug tonight. They might not wear medals, but they carry something far greater, the kind of loyalty this world could use a little more of.